Hello everyone, my name's Mathew Pollard and I'm the author of the best-selling Introvert's Edge series. And in today's interview that I'm doing with Dov Baron, we are going to discuss the underestimated, the often neglected, forgotten members of your team, the introverts, the people that often you don't get to speak up, wish they spoke up more, and in truth, it's your fault. Let's discuss why and what you can do about it. Cheers.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Hey, would you do me a favor? Send me a note on, a DM on one of the big 4 social media outlets and tell us what platform you listen to us on. Is it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Plus, whatever it is. Tell us your favorite episode, because I'm going to pick a winner from everybody who fills me in on that information. Everybody sends me a DM. The prize is worth $1,500. I want to thank you for joining us here on today's Leadership and Loyalty. Now, let me ask you, what can you do to up-level your leadership? Well, let's start by examining and challenging the societal labels about who or what you have to be in order to succeed. What old messages are you secretly carrying around that if you gave yourself the space to examine, you'd see a complete nonsense? What's more, how many people on your team are just fading into the background because of those labels, and as a result, you're missing out tapping into the gold mine of talent that your people would just love to offer? Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. And we always need your help in staying relevant, so please get over to wherever you tune into, rate, review, subscribe to the show, and please share the show with everybody you know. We're also incredibly grateful for all of our regular listeners. A big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, and we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Do you have an inherently biased system at a corporate evaluation or elevation? What I mean is, are people who get recognized, who climb the ladder fastest, are they the ones who step forward the fastest? Are those the ones who are most extroverted, who are the most outspoken? Well, if that's the case, what's the cost? How about re-examining your talent pool? What do I mean? Well, think about your direct reports. Who is likely to step forward and tell you their ideas? And as a result, whose ideas and strategies are going to get missed? Not because they're not good, not because they're not even as good as the person who spoke up, but because that person was not assertive or not extroverted. What if there is a massive resource in your talent pool that you never even knew was there because you never noticed them, and you've taken maybe their skills and their talents for granted, and as a result, they get fed up and they take those skills to their competitor? What could you do right now to turn that around? Well, let's find out together, because our guest today is Mathew Pollard. Forbes called Mathew the real deal. He's the best-selling author of The Introvert's Edge, Amazon's 8th most sold book of the week. A Book Authority's #2 best introverts book of all time. He is the answer to the question, can introverts make it in an extroverted world, in the look at me world? He is responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar business, and they're all success stories. And he did it all by the age of 30. Global Gurus list, he made that list too, named him as the top 30 sales professionals. Top Sales World magazine named him at the top 50 speakers, and BigSpeak lists him on the international top 10 sales trainers. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome the Introvert's Dream, Mathew Pollard.
That is
Look,
probably the
man,
most entertaining introduction I've ever had, mate. I really appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
you're very welcome. It's a pleasure, mate. Let's start with the question I always like to start with, which is this. In the world of leadership development, what is the question that we should be looking for the answer to, but we're just not? We're kind of like blowing it to the side. What is the question we need to be looking for the answer to?
Absolutely. Why are we underestimating the talent that we have within our introverted pool of staff? I mean, that to me is the biggest question, because those are the people that get fed up. They go and work somewhere else. And we all know how expensive it is to replace these people, often with two people, because we just didn't recognize how much work they were putting in.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very important point. This world that we live in today is a social media world. It's all about look at me, and it's very easy for those people to get missed. So, I talked about you being the introvert's dream. So we are all on a journey. Yours is obviously a highly accomplished one now. However, the line from where you were to where you are is never straight. And if you don't mind, please share with us, what was the turning point in your life, in your business philosophy? Because you started out as a very much an introvert, and now you're this top speaker, and people wouldn't likely put you into the category of introvert.
I think that's an interesting question. And I think I would highlight first for the people that are listening is a lot of people will say, oh, I used to be introverted, but now I'm not. And I think that's a really important point, because for me, people will say, Matt, you're so articulate now. There's no way that you're an introvert. I'm like, that's right, because we're all supposed to hide under a bridge together, right? Not together, separate bridges. But
separate bridges.
Separate bridges. But the whole thing that I kind of look at is, a lot of people will look at a successful person and they'll project extroversion upon them. They don't look at, where those people started. So, and never mind that people like Zig Ziglar, the most well-known sales trainer in the world. By the way, introverts can't sell, right? Yet the most well-known sales trainer that we've ever had was an introvert. Never mind that Ivan Misner, the most well-known networker in the world that created BNI, the world's largest networking group, was an introvert. Oprah Winfrey was an introvert. Is an introvert, for gosh sakes. So the thing we have to really understand is just because we perceive people as extroverted doesn't mean that they are. And for me, I had a reading speed of a sixth grader in late high school. A lot of my presentations that I speak at, when I speak at corporations, I put up this photo of me with terrible acne at my sister's wedding. And I talk about that, and I talk about the kid with the funny lenses, because I got diagnosed with this thing called Erlen syndrome, which means I put on this pair of funny colored lenses and miraculously I can learn to read. I can't read like everyone else.
You had a learning disability at school. You were reading at a sixth grade level, is that what you said?
That's correct.
In high school. So, and you've got the acne. So you're not exactly the glowing, let's take
not
this
the poster boy of extroversion. Let's put it that way.
Right. So, you're probably the nerdiest looking guy in the school. You're not, and a lot of the challenges I know, because I'm actually an extrovert, and even my wife doesn't believe me. I'm an introvert rather, and even my wife doesn't believe me. Because she never knew me in that phase of, my expression. But I had also had a reading learning disability. So when you have a learning disability, and like you said, you've got the acne and all those kinds of things, it's easy to believe the messages you're getting, right? So for me, that's the interesting thing, is the messaging around that. Sometimes very directly, oh, you're a nerd, or you're an idiot, or whatever it might be. But it's hard to get that shit out of your head and say, hold on a second, I've got something else. What I'm really interested in is, what was the point when the messages, which would have been bombarding, I'm sure, suddenly or over time began to move away, or you began to replace them?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it happened completely by accident. And I think that happens to a lot of discoveries, right? We are in this part of our life and we think that's just the way it's always going to be. And then something out of our control happens and we either adapt or it all goes horribly wrong. And for me, yeah, I was told I was the slow kid. I was told I was never going to be able to achieve things. My parents got called into school once, I remember, because I said that I wanted to have this, I wanted this career that they knew that there was no way I was ever going to be able to achieve. So from that, I took a job at a real estate agency, and it wasn't to be the person out selling, it was to do data entry in the back office. And literally weeks into my employment, and weeks before Christmas actually, the company shut down, and here I am completely out of work. And for those people that haven't been to Australia, we take our summer break and Christmas at the same time. So no one's there hiring. I mean, people are on holidays from the 20th of December to the 15th or 20th of January. Yep. The only jobs that were hiring were these things called commission-only sales roles. And,
lovely.
First, terrifying, right?
Sure.
But that was all I could get. So I applied for 3 jobs, and I actually got 3 interviews, and then I got 3 jobs. And I was like, oh, maybe they see something in me that I don't. And my manager literally said at my first day there, which is selling business to business telecommunications, Matt, we just hire everyone. We've just got this saying, we throw mud up against the wall and we see what sticks. So my confrontation with, can I succeed in this so-called extroverted arena, was, okay, after 5 days product training and not a single second of sales training, I get thrown on Sydney Road, which is in Melbourne, Australia. It's like 1,000 doors on each side, and said, hey, go sell. Well, I didn't know what to say. It was door after door. I remember walking to the first one, and I was politely told to leave. Then I was sworn at. Then I was told to get a real job. And then just door after door, this happened until I made my first sale on the 93rd door. And I remember I was ecstatic for like 45 seconds until I had the second realization for the day. I got to do this again tomorrow and the next day and the next. That wasn't okay. And I think what happens for a lot of introverts, anybody really that's confronted with this, is they have fight or flight. I'm just going to hustle it out. I'm going to grind it out, or I'm going to give up. Well, I decided, and that was the turning point. I decided that sales had to be a system, because without it being a system, my year was just going to be horrible. And I think that was the turning point. It was the realization that it had to be a system, and then putting me on that path to go and discover that system that would, in a lot of ways, change my life and lead to all of my success that followed.
So let's jump in there, because, again, this labeling of introvert, learning disabled, whatever the terms might be, that is not usually associated with the guy who will knock on the second door, let alone the 97th door, right? So it's like, this is not for me, because that bugger off, go get a decent job, or, you're a loser, or whatever it is you get from knocking on those doors. Each one of those is a confirmation of the shitty messages. So what I'm interested in is, why did you go to the second, the third, the 93rd door? What was it in you?
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting question. And I think that this is what really separates. A lot of people say, I got told the whole way growing up that I just wasn't applying myself, that I wasn't studying hard enough, but I'd worked so hard. After getting diagnosed with Irlen syndrome, I hustled every day to get into the top 20% of the state. I worked so hard to get to where I was. Nothing was ever easy for me. So I was used to being the underdog. I was used to trying to find a different path to success. That was just how I was, everything had forced me to that point. So yeah, when I went to the first door and I was told to leave, my natural brain went, I'm just got to keep pushing. Life's never easy. I'm just going to keep pushing. And I think that's a really great separation for people when they're looking as leaders towards their team, is that if you have somebody that's willing to just grind it out, what you're really highlighting here is poor Johnny, who's an introvert, or poor Sarah, who's an introvert that's willing to grind it out. What they're highlighting is, I'm willing to put the effort in, I just don't have strategies to do better. Those are the people you want to help. The people that are just willing to give up or just go accept that subpar performance, those are the people that you want to say, well, maybe they're the people that aren't, we're not willing to help. Just like, let's face it, extroverts have their burdens to bear as well. Some might say they're not the best listeners, they're not the most empathetic. The difference is, and I think this is huge, the difference is a HR manager will look at an extrovert that doesn't listen well or isn't empathetic, and they'll go and get them leadership coaching to help them learn those skills. Where we look at the introverted members of our team and go, oh, they're never going to be able to do it. Well, that's not true. That's the stigma that we're trying to confront here. And for me, what I did on that day was decide that sales had to be a system, and then I had to figure out that system around my boundaries. So for me, I couldn't pick up a Brian Tracy or a Zig Ziglar book. I mean, I had a reading speed of a sixth grader. It would have taken me a year to learn that. But what I did is I said, what if YouTube has videos? And I typed in the sales system and all these videos came up, and I literally would spend 8 hours a day, when I got home, looking at the next step in the process and perfecting that. And then I'd go out and apply it the following day. And I mean, 16-hour days, 16 hours of practice on the weekends. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Yet day after day, I got better. And soon it was 75 doors, then it was 48 doors, then it was 21 doors, then it was 19. I eventually got it down to making a sale on average every 3 doors. And it was literally 6 weeks in, only 6 weeks, my manager pulls me aside, because I was the quiet guy, handed my paperwork in downstairs. All the boisterous salespeople upstairs talking about how hard the market was, how they got that deal. I said nothing. Well, 6 weeks in, he pulled out the national sales reports, which back then we only got once a month. I was the #1 salesperson in the company, which happened to be the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, I had that potential, and I think this is important for leaders. I had that potential, but what if I didn't ask myself, what if sales was a system? As leaders, we have the opportunity to help our introverted team members, our introverted leaders within our organization realize they can make amazing leaders, amazing salespeople, amazing networkers, amazing public speakers, but not by just winging things, which is what the extroverts do. As a matter of fact, by following systems that are designed to work to leverage the strengths of the introvert. But then what you'll find is when they leverage those systems with their introverted skill set, they can actually outdo the extroverts at all of those so-called natural arenas, because, I mean, let's face it, a planned system will always outperform just winging it every day of the week.
So I want to talk in part 2 of the show. I want to talk more about what you believe the systems need to be for an extrovert. But before that, I think it's important for us to get a context. So the context would be this. I think that oftentimes words are thrown around. People talk about authentic or innovative or integral, and I roll my eyes because it's like, Jesus, you actually don't know what you're talking about. And now there are many more psychological words are thrown around, like narcissist, and like, yeah, you don't know what that actually is. It's pop psychology you're talking about. So let's talk about this in this context, which is this word introvert, because I think that people categorize themselves and they don't really understand. They look at me and go, you can't possibly be an introvert. You've spoken everywhere. You've done all this, blah, blah, blah. You're the person who can speak up. Yeah, well, still there's a little bit of twitching in the under areas before I speak. That's introvert, So how do you define introvert? Just so that people can have a context here, because you've written these books about being an introvert, whether it's the introvert's edge or the introvert's edge in networking. So give us your definition.
Sure. So, introversion, yes, it's a spectrum, but I think that psychologists have made it way too confusing, probably to get more research grants. And that means as a leader, we don't really have an easy way of diagnosing or determining who is who. Now, of course, you've got studies like Myers-Briggs that say you're an introvert, but a lot of times it comes with, so these are your disadvantages, which means people are scared to take those tests, because as soon as they get that I at the front of it, it's like, oh, now no one's going to give me a leadership position. So let's be very clear here. Introversion is only one thing. It is how you get your energy. Period. If you get your energy by hanging out with people, if you go to a networking event and you're charged up and then you want to go to an after party or you want to go to the next event, you're probably an extrovert. If, on the other hand, you go to a networking event and you're exhausted afterwards, you're probably an introvert. Now, that doesn't mean you can or can't do those activities because you're an introvert or extrovert. It means that at the end, you're either drained or you're charged up. Now, the thing that is important for everybody to understand is, yes, it is a spectrum, but it doesn't mean, I hear people all the time, oh, I used to be an introvert, but now I'm an extrovert. No, that doesn't happen. Those people still get their energy drained. And the thing is that if they learn systems and processes that don't suit them and allow them to draw their natural talents and abilities, the real problem is they can actually get burned out, and they do come across as feeling inauthentic. So because of that, because introverts tend to process things internally quite considerably afterwards, they'll kind of tear themselves apart at night, which is why they don't rest so well. So it's important that there are processes and systems for extroverts, there are processes and systems for introverts, and by leveraging their natural strengths, the important thing there to understand is that they then will able to really find their own and their own stride in doing it in a really successful way. Now, that will mean it won't draw as much energy when they're networking, when they're speaking from stage. I know me, I speak on stage all over the world, and before I started to figure it out, I'd open up the fire hose of information, I'd feel really anxious, and I'd get off and I'd be wiped. Now, I'm still tired, but about 20 or 30 minutes of recharge and I'm back and feeling fine.
Yeah, and I think that so it's a really good point for people to understand is to check yourself about how you feel after doing whatever it is. And the other thing is that I think that, as you said, this spectrum piece, but the spectrum piece is give yourself room to consider that there is something called situational extrovert and situational introvert. There are environments that you will be in where you will feel drained, and you'll go, well, how come I'm energized over here? And it's a situational thing. So, there are things where I'm till this day still quite introverted and I feel quite drained having done them, but there are other things that energize me, and that's because I've learned a system that works for me. So it's also a very important thing to talk. We're coming to the very end here of part one of this fabulous interview with Mathew. So let's start by finish up by saying, Mathew, please tell our audience where they can find out more about you and your wonderful books. And then in part two of the show, we're going to talk more about what you as a leader, as you're listening to this, as you're watching this, what you as a leader can do to bring up your introverts, to bring them into the fore. And if you are an introvert, the other part we want to go to is what can you do to bring yourself forward so that you get recognized? So Mathew, please tell us where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for asking. So obviously you can definitely check me out on all my social profiles, and I put a ton of free videos out there. We also have a great podcast we call The Introvert's Edge. And, if you want to check out my books, the free chapters are available at theintrovertsedge.com and theintrovertsedge.com/networking. And if your goal is just to overcome the fear of selling and networking, those first chapters will do that for you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mathew. And for you, dear audience, remember to stay curious, my friends, stay curious. And we'll see you for part two of this delicious conversation in just one click away. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.